Well, portfolio choice has many different buzzing features. The features I really focus on is the idea that the portfolios we observe in the data seem to be very concentrated in a few particular things, and the practical investor does not seem to be interested in diversification the way that economic theory preaches. And that to me at least suggests that we need to be thinking about what are the differences between people. Every one of us is different, and really it's like an economy of heterogeneous people. It's not an economy of one representative agent. And I think one very intuitive way that we're different is that we have access to different information. Or maybe not access in particular, but if you pay attention to different things, everyone reads different news, everyone is aware of different events happening around the world, and I was interested in seeing, okay, what is the interaction, how do you choose what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to, and how that interact with your portfolio choice. So on one hand, the idea that, okay, people know different things, there's this information asymmetry, if you want, in the economy, where I know something that you don't know, and you know something I don't know. This information asymmetry generating biased portfolios and differing across people has been around for a very long time. The thing that we mainly learn from a large part of this literature is that actually, if you really want to believe that this is the main mechanism of explaining portfolio choice, you need very strong information asymmetry between people, and then kind of like the puzzle becomes, okay, if we are really so different from each other, but both of us hold very valuable information to each other, why would we not communicate? Why would we not learn from each other? So then that leads us to the question of, okay, so now we need to study optimal learning choice, the optimal learning behavior of the people. And that's a much more recent literature, and that's the literature my paper is part of. And the literature at this point is really focused on models, if I can go a little bit more technical, and that have increasing returns to information. And what happens in this type of models is that the sort of the learning problem of the agent has a very stable solution, where it's always the case that you only learn about one thing, and once you figure out what is the highest value learning for you, that's the only thing you pay attention to. And then, if the world was described like that, if the world was a paradigm like this, then it doesn't really matter what is the mechanism that makes you pay attention to thing A or to thing B, because just taking this as given, then we know what's going to happen. At the point that we know that person A is going to pay attention only to thing A, and that's what he's going to do, we can develop a very strong structure on top of it and see what happens. But then I was always wondering, okay, what happens if that's not the case? Because I feel like I don't only pay attention to like one thing, right? And I also don't think that there are that strong increasing returns to information where I can keep digging into the same thing, digging, and keep getting more value out of it. So what I was interested in is see if we can shift the paradigm the literature has really focused on into maybe a little bit of a richer framework where it's optimal for people to actually pay attention to many different things going on around them. And in a framework like this, then the question emerges, alright, what is this endogenous mechanism that's going to make a particular type of information more valuable than other type of information to you? And the first thing that really I focused on, and that's the thing that the paper is written about, is sort of the labor income of agents. My background is in macroeconomics, and if you ask a macroeconomist what is the most important thing in macroeconomy, they're going to say labor income. It's like this is by far the biggest thing in our GDP and the biggest source of income to most people. And what turns out then, if we add this consideration for labor income to the agent's problem, is that a person has very high incentive to be informed about the events that are affecting their labor income, because that's kind of like a very big part of your total human wealth. And the example is also very intuitive. It's something saying like, okay, if I live in Detroit, and even if I don't work exactly in the auto industry, I'll be very interested in what's happening to the auto industry. Or I say I work in Torino, because these are sort of like shocks that are like really hitting everything in that particular locality that I live in. And we know that localities, even inside the country, are very different from each other. We can have very heterogeneous outcomes. So that's kind of like sort of the intuition behind it. And I wanted to explore, okay, let's take this labor income and see if it can give you strong enough incentives so that we generate strong information asymmetry, and we can recreate portfolio biases as we observe in the data, and that's sort of like the quantitative exercise in the paper. But then more interestingly, I wanted to really emphasize and focus on how this is a little bit different paradigm from the existing literature, where we have to really think hard about what is the mechanism that makes information more valuable than other things. So I just have to describe now, I forgot to mention, but the reason information is more valuable and one thing than the other is because information is a non-rival good. If I learn one thing, I can use that thing to both make financial decisions, but also make other decisions like forecasting my labor income, or just making decisions on what consumption basket to use, all kinds of these things. So this one thing has many different uses, and the more uses I find for it doesn't diminish its value to me. And that type of framework can really be contrasted in a framework where we have increasing returns to information acquisition, because then we can ask the question, all right, now we can study different people, be exposed to different mechanisms that bias their information sets, and we can then try to study what are the most important mechanisms, but in particular, we can ask the question, okay, if there's variation between people and what mechanism is important to them, can we exploit that variation to see if the mechanism is important at all for portfolio choice? Because there's this other literature over here that says, okay, it doesn't matter what is the mechanism that makes information different for you, because you always have like very simple corner solution in your learning technology. So that's what I try to do in the empirical section, and I think I'm providing some empirical results that show that yes, indeed, it matters what is the actual mechanism that is forcing you to pay attention to one thing or not to the other thing. And I'm hoping that actually there will be a lot more empirical work coming into the future to try to get a better understanding of what are these different mechanisms that compel different people to pay attention to different types of news and acquire different types of information.